We'll now move on to the next session, which is Global Green Lentils Outlook. And we might have to briefly interrupt the session to welcome the President of Sri Lanka. But right now, we will continue on schedule. And I'd like to request on the panel, we have with us the personnel, they're already ready. Please welcome the President and CEO of Simpson Seeds Canada, operating out of Moose Jaw, Canada, Saskatchewan. They have about 4 processing plants, exporting pulse crops and canary seeds to over 70 countries. Mr. Greg Simpson. Thank you, sir. Next, representing a company that has facilities in Canada, India, Australia, China, Jordan, and USA. He brings to the dais a wealth of experience to focus in his position right now, which is Senior Vice President, Seaboard Special Crops. Please welcome Brad Ford. A quality supplier of pulses to the food industry, operating out of Germany and Canada. Please welcome Managing Director, Shilta and Mark Gamba Baha, Michael Kemperdick. And to complete the panel with about 30 years of industry experience with all aspects of international trading, please welcome Senior Vice President, Columbia Grain, Ron Williams. With that, I hand you over to the panel. Ladies and gentlemen.
To share the mic. Okay. Good afternoon. How do you like that? I just touched my computer and turned it off. So anyways, I'll just take a second here to reload. And anyways, good afternoon. It's an honor and a privilege to be able to address you here in Sri Lanka. I've been coming to Sri Lanka since 2001, and it's been quite an impressive transformation of a country over the last 18 years. To see the expansion in the industry and the dull processing, and to see the expansion going on out here in the port with the development of an island, some $15 billion of investment. And then this wonderful hotel, it's been quite incredible. Just get my presentation back up and running. My power is back. So as you see, there's our opening slide. Our company is involved in processing in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. And so it's a family-run operation that has been exporting to 85 countries worldwide. This year marks our 39th year. I'll just move on, and one of our whole objectives here is we're talking about the theme earlier this morning. It's really about nourishing the world. That's what we're all here to do, and it's just a privilege for us to be part of that global process of feeding the world. On today's outline, we're going to be discussing Canadian green lentil production, followed by U.S. green lentil production. Later on in my presentation, first ever shot at throwing up some numbers for Russia, Kazakhstan green lentil production. We'll also talk about the weather and other market influencers. I also want to mention that compared to being at the GPC last year in July when I participated in this panel, is quite a different scenario because we were able to, at that point in time, we knew what where we were in terms of planting. May is the normal planting time for green lentils in North America and in the Northern Hemisphere. Here we are in May, and we haven't even hardly started seeding, so it's quite a challenge. Plus, there's been some changes, as you know, with the other origins playing a big part in the supply-demand balance. And then we'll also talk about some other market influencers as well. So I'll start, first of all, on the Canadian scene. This slide here shows the intended seeded acreage according to a recent seeding report that was released by Stats Canada just a couple weeks ago. So this is an updated slide to show that the large green bar there is the large green, or typically known as a layered type lentil planting. And seeding of large greens is going to be up a little bit this year. This is largely due to the fact that large green lentils are at a premium to reds. And also, lentils are a pretty efficient crop when it comes to moisture utilization. So farmers like the rotation, of course. The price is at a slight premium to red lentils, so it's a little bit more profitable. And so it's no surprise to see that the planting went up from 975,000 to an estimated 992,000 acres. I think it's really important to point out that these numbers are in flux. Even as farmers go to the fields, they may have done this study 6 or 8 weeks ago, but farmers are changing their minds on the go. So these are not cast in stone at all. Did I not click that? Sorry. Sorry about that. My clicker wasn't working. So there's the outline that I talked about earlier, and there's the bars. Sorry about that. Okay, so I'll let you study that. You can see the trends there for the large green bar, showing the slight increase of layered lentils. Then the purple line is medium greens. It's really no surprise for most of the world. People are importing that the larger green is the most preferred size, and the regular size richly typed lentil has been not as popular in Canada. But we are seeing a slight increase in demand of the richlies from 28,000 to 41,000 acres. And then the blue bar is the small green or Eston type lentil. We're seeing a slight decline in the Estons. Okay, so there's the yields are basically on about a 5-year average yield. So again, this is a really big guess at this juncture to think in terms of what we'd be producing for these different classes of green lentils in Canada. If we have near normal rain, we should be able to increase production from 503,000 metric tons to 566,000 tons of large green. The richly from 15,000 to some 21,000 tons, and the small greens, which are represented in the blue, from 194,000, we see a decline to 183,000 tons. So essentially with normal rain, as you can see, the red line represents the overall green production. With normal rains, we should see a rebound in total supply. We have had a very unusual weather pattern occurring as well that's notable. On the Easter long weekend, which was in March this year, we had a record minus 29 below in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. It was the coldest on record. So that means it goes back to the 1890s that we had such a cold period. We still had snow on the ground at the very last days of April. On my farm, the robins came back and the snow was still on the front lawn. And then within about 2 days, the weather just completely shifted from winter right into summer. Seemed like we had no spring this year. And suddenly the snow disappeared, and farmers were rapidly trying to go from frozen cold snow to warmer weather to get their machinery ready for the field. So also with this condition, the planting is a little later. So with a slightly later planting, this does mean that there's risk of flowering during the hottest part of the summer in July. So this is another factor to be watching in terms of what the yields will be for the crop. Germination is a critical issue right now. I did call home yesterday to see how things are going. Farmers who are ready to go are rapidly trying to plant while the moisture remains. But in other parts of the lentil production area, the moisture conditions are in dire condition, and in some cases, some farmers may be having to wait for rain before they can plant. So here's the exports. We expect with better supply that our exports will continue to increase. I have a couple reasons for that. I do think the Canadian dollar being weaker right now, we're right around 129 today, trading Canadian to US dollar, so that gives the Canadian production a currency advantage in terms of reflecting our costs internationally. Also, because we had good quality this year, we were regaining lost production that we lost to other origins because of the quality problems we had in 2016. So I think it's another important factor. We should probably be talking about pet food here a bit, because in North America, the amount of lentils and chickpeas and peas that are going into pet food is unprecedented and is becoming a major driver in the market. So we do have alternatives other than the traditional markets. Okay, so there's our top lentil importers for Canadian. And you can see the impact that India had, the large green bar there. When India had 2 failed monsoons in 14-15, of course, pigeon pea prices went to unprecedented prices, like $1,800 a ton, and layered lentils were going in there as a substitute. So we had a record demand of 200,000 tons, and this is what drove demand for green lentils, not only in Canada, but also United States and Russia, Kazakhstan. We were joking that almost if you could plant them in your garden, you could make money on growing green lentils. So then you can see the rapid decline of India as an importer, as overproduction globally and good weather in all producing countries, including India, had a big impact on the demand for green lentils. Algeria is a big importer. They've been steady as an importer of Canadian, but they also buy US and more recently, more from Russia, Kazakhstan, as their production has been increasing. Morocco and Mexico are good, steady consumers of the Eston small green lentil. They prefer #1 quality. Turkey, they've been reducing their imports, again, because of the influence of Russia, Kazakhstan as a supplier. So these are our top 5 that I've brought to everybody to see there, and we'll see whether that actually happens. I also want to point out that last year's production in Canada was probably one of the best quality years we had in history. I can count on my hand 5 times over the last 40 years where we had 95% of our production was a #2 or better quality. Quite often, we only produce about 35% as a #1. And so I think it's important that everybody here who's looking to Canada and as a supplier of green lentils, that probability of having 95% in the top 2 grades is pretty rare. So just touching on the US side here for a moment. This is a recent USDA report that just came out. You can see that the biggest acreage reduction is expected in Montana, down 220,000 acres. North Dakota down 90,000 acres. In the blue, you can see those are early estimates. Where they expect a rebound in production to reach 411,000 tons, despite the drop in acres. So of this tonnage, we'd expect about 21% or 72,000 tons bigger than last year's crop due to recovery in yields. Once again, the caveat is what will the moisture conditions be like, and and we'll be discussing that a little later on. So in 2017, the rich leaf production was about 291,000 tons from 746,000 acres. So again, we're just projecting 2018 numbers, but we'd expect that to be up somewhat. And these are just the notes I just went over there, but in 2018, at the bottom there, you can see with good moisture, we could be potentially up to 350,000 tons of richly type lentil. There'd be some layered mixed in there and some estins as well, but that would be just a real rough estimate. So let's just drill in a little bit on the moisture map for Saskatchewan. So in the red, you can see there where I've drilled in on the majority of the production area, which is in Saskatchewan, parts of Alberta on the eastern side of Alberta. And as it stands right now, the moisture conditions are better in the west than they are as you go east. They get worse. So you can see the darker brown spots there. That starts right around Moose Jaw and east. It's pretty darn dry there. As I mentioned yesterday, I phoned and talked to my son to see how things were in the field, and he was saying that in Moose Jaw, when he was driving over the fields, you could still see cracks in the ground. We have a heavy clay soil that when it's dry, tends to crack and open up because it expands and contracts with moisture. And so that gives you an idea just how dry it is when you have cracks in the ground in the spring, it's very dry. So Moose Jaw and east is in pretty rough shape. Prognostications are very inaccurate. Nobody really knows, but at the moment we have a neutral, I would say between an El Nino and La Nina, we're in a neutral phase right now. So at the moment we could move in any direction, but largely a high pressure system has been setting up over the United States and Canada and has been blocking the moisture that would normally flow in the spring. From the forecasts I've been seeing, we have probably a 75 to 85% chance that our moisture or rains this year will be below normal. So when you look at the moisture conditions here in the subsoil, you can already predict that chances are we're not going to even grow an average crop this year. So our top 5-6 inches has enough moisture to plant, but the profile that we grow a crop on is 4 feet. And so if you take a probe and push it in the ground, you'll find that the probe will only go down a few inches, and the probe stops because it hits the hard, dry ground. So we are definitely in need of moisture. Here's a moisture map of the United States. The big red area I think is important to point out. That's where the winter wheat growing areas of the United States is, and it's been a driver in terms of wheat markets. So why would I mention that? Well, farmers will use other commodities to compete for planted acres, and right now I'm pretty sure they're considering whether wheat wouldn't be a better option to growing pulses, as the prices have been declining since these intentions were printed. We've seen further bid declines to growers, which is continuing to tell them not to produce lentils. So we could see further reduction in the actual plantings if given these lack of incentive to grow lentils. Anyways, drilling in on this particular diagram, you have to go to the northern part of this of the U.S. here to point out where Montana and North Dakota is. It's right in the center, just above that red area. I did have it marked out, but somehow I lost my mark. But anyways, if you go right up to that red dot at the top of Montana on the eastern side, that area is very dry. And I think that the U.S. lentil production area is going to be equally challenged in terms of obtaining a good crop this year. I want to move on to a chart. Marlena Borst provided me this slide, and it's about as good of a guess as we could come up with. Like I said, this is the first GPC convention where we've been able to come up with a slide. Certainly, I'm sure there's people here who could maybe more accurately describe what's going on over in Russia and Kazakhstan. From what I'm understanding, the farms are very large. It's not unusual for a farm production base there to be 350,000 hectares, which is huge. We always knew that there was Russian-Kazakhstan competition to compete with. 8,000-10,000 tons of green lentils would be a normal short-term competitor in the past years, but this last year, a notable shift took place, and now we're seeing where there's probably, in this slide, we're throwing 70,000 to 80,000 tons of green lentils. You know what? It could be 150,000 tons for all I know. Unfortunately, I don't have those details. There's no statistics that I could get my hands on, but maybe somebody else here could fill in the blanks. But I do think that... Oh, sorry about that. I'm running 2 slide presentations side by side here, so I'll let you study that. So you can see where Russia and Kazakhstan have been producing for many years at a small rate. And that's a stunning graph depicting the sudden increase in production in the Russian-Kazakhstan area, and I believe it's more in Kazakhstan. I do think that they have some challenges, though, in terms of what they can produce for quality on a year-by-year basis, so we'll see what happens this next year. They also have very expensive costs of producing or transporting product to the port of Mersin, and trucking costs, I understand, are $120, $150 a ton, so when you work that back to an FOB farm, I think it's likely more profitable for people in that region to produce wheat than it would be to produce lentils. So my expectation is that the signal is to back off on green and red lentil production in Russia, Kazakhstan. A John Deere combine is going to cost just as much in Kazakhstan to buy as it does in Canada or Montana or North Dakota. So I expect the same signals would have an impact on them. So other influencers, we do want to talk about India. As you know, the duty, 33%, is definitely a barrier. The increase in production of all pulses inside of India and the lack of their demand has definitely impacted demand. Penalties for fumigation are also an issue. So this is a problem. We could also talk about other countries, Algeria changing their policies. So you have to be a packager or canner to import. You have to put 125% of your cash up front to be able to buy. Iran has its own issues. As you know, there's a pending decision coming up here on May the 12th about sanctions for Iran. Their currency has been devalued, and it's difficult for traders to obtain US dollars. And then finally, this last slide. Yeah, and finally, I wanted to just talk to you about things that we can be doing. And I was pretty proud of my daughter Elise, and she's been doing some food cooking classes at her house. So every week she's been having 4 or 5 people coming in. So she has been doing her part about the half a cup consumption habit. So. Anyways, with that, I'll end my part of the presentation, and I want to pass it over now to panelists here. And Brad, I just want to maybe start with you, and maybe you could make some comments about how you see things from your perspective.
Ladies and gentlemen, His Excellency Maithripala Sirisena, President of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka, is in the hall. It's now my privilege to request the President of Global Pulse Confederation, Mr. Hussein Arsalan, to do the formal welcome.
His Excellency of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka, Maithripala Sirisena. Hope I pronounce properly your name, sir. Thank you very much. We are very much proud to see here in our biggest industry meeting in the world. And we are pleased to do this event in this country in Colombo and Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is an important country for the pulse traders, and it's also a great pleasure for us. Although you had a very busy schedule and you had a speech in the parliament, and after your speech you left your parliamentary session, I think it's the 8th parliamentary session, and this was an important session for you, and you came here to support our industry. I would like to thank you very much again for your support. Without your support, this meeting wouldn't take place in this country, and in this time. Thank you very much, and welcome again. As I previously emphasized, Sri Lanka is important, especially for the lentil. Sri Lanka per capita consumption is being 6.5 to 7 kilo, is really the highest in the world. And with these numbers, if you call yourself a lentil trader, you should certainly visit Sri Lanka. And that's why I always wish to have one of our conventions in Sri Lanka during my presidency time. And this is a great opportunity for us. And I would like to also thanks to Mahmoud and Salim brothers for their support to bringing up to speed here and hospitality of the Sri Lankan people. In the world, we are passing through the difficult time in the pulse industry, and to be here in a peaceful country, and also if I compare in my last visit to Sri Lanka that I made 6 years ago, the wealth and the smell of richness is more and more in this country than before. And this happened with your leadership, sir. Thank you very much. I would like to also convey this in behalf of my industry. Wealthier countries are also, for us, easier to deal with for our industry, and as in all other industries. So thank you very much again for your visit, and I would like to thank all of you that your presence here. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we thank His Excellency Maithripala Sirisena, President of the Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka, for his presence, and also recognize the presence of the Honorable Minister for Trade, Commerce and Industries, the Honorable Rishad Badruddin, who again joins us with His Excellency. We thank the gentleman, and now, ladies and gentlemen, we will continue with the global outlook of green pulses. May I request the panel to please take their places on the dais. This is the last and final session of the day, and as usual, questions on our app. You can see it on screen, slido.com, SLIDO, hashtag Pulses 2018. Back to the panel, ladies and gentlemen.
Hello. Yeah, I'd just like to give each one of the panelists an opportunity to respond to the information that I put up. So Brad, would you just start it off and just give some comments, context in terms of what you're seeing from your perspective in terms of planting, weather conditions, and maybe some things on price direction?
Yeah. Okay. Greg touched on a lot of, different points as it pertains to the production and yield and acreage of this year's crop. I think in terms of weather, the verdict is still out, but we all know that we're starting with far less subsoil moisture than what we had last year. So that's going to remain a concern all the way through. In terms of acreage, planted acreage, a lot of people would wonder, with prices falling the way they have, why are we planting actually more green lentils this year than last year? But if you compare the potential gross margin per acre that the farmer is looking at with green lentils versus all the other crop choices that he has, they're not number one, number two, or even number three like they have been for the last couple of years, but they're still in that top 5, 6 choices. So for that reason, they'll continue to plant green lentils. And of course, we all know what's happened with red lentils, so the green lentil guys will stick with their green lentils. And the other comment that Greg made relative to what's happening in the U.S. in terms of wheat and the weather and the yields and the prices of wheat, that's just another reason why the growers are looking at staying with pulses. And I think maybe the third and most important reason is that the farmers in Canada, like other parts of the world, but in Western Canada, have become very large. And, for them to plant and to harvest 10, 15, 20, 50,000 acres of cropland, they need to be able to spread out the workload. And so by planting or introducing pulses and maybe more pulses into their rotation, they have a longer time in the spring to get their crops all planted, and they have a wider period of time in the fall to get them all harvested, which allows them to actually farm more land with the same amount of equipment and the same amount of labor. So that's a benefit to them, and that's why, good price or bad price, they don't change the production as much as they normally would.
All right, thank you. So our mics are now live, Michael, so if you want to just use your... So, Michael, could you, from your perspective, what's going on in Europe, shifts in demand, how do you see the impact of Russia, Kazakhstan, and are they, in terms of being a supplier to that end of the world? So I appreciate your comments there.
Yeah, first of all, I agree to your presentation, essentially what our Canadian office is telling us, and for everybody in the auditorium that wasn't there when we had the panel in Vancouver, this guy is the lentil guru, at least since last year, because everybody was panicking when we were sitting in Vancouver over the drought. Greg pointed out that there was enough subsoil moisture, and it got in, at least in Canada, as a decent crop. And today he pointed out that there's no subsoil moisture, so that should probably ring some bells. Now going to Europe, demand is boring, it's stable. We see Russia coming up very recently now as a supplier of lentils to the world market. If the numbers on the slide are correct, nobody knows. We can dispute about them or not, and we should look at the trend, and the trend is upside, which is certainly because Russian farmers are very much trend followers, and we've had 2 continuous years with very high prices, and of course that's been boosting the ideas of planting lentils in Russia, and it's actually a region that can produce quality lentils, and we've seen it this year. It's we're going from one extreme to the other. So we've had a very tight supply, quality issues, very high prices. Now we're coming to the opposite. We have a lot of supply, less demand, and we're having good quality. And Russia is certainly contributing to that, and I think it's also hurting the traditional exporters. But it's a lack of consistency still. I believe that Russia and the Ukraine as well will develop as more important suppliers of pulses and especially lentils to the world market. But we have a lack of consistency. You see it's been very volatile in recent years in terms of production, and it's probably a compiled number with Kazakhstan, and I really can't commend a lot of Kazakhstan. Other than I know it's even more volatile than Russia is, because production and production technologies are not really highly sophisticated yet. But we see a lot of volatility, and we also see a bigger risk pattern. If a crop in Canada fails, that's probably 20-25% less yield. If a crop in Russia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan fails, it could be 50% of the fields don't get harvested because yield is so marginal. So that is the risk potential, and that is certainly also the reason, or one of the reasons, Russian lentils don't play a predominant role in the European market yet. It's still mostly Canadian or US lentils that get sold because they are consistently available in a consistent quality. People don't walk on contracts. Right now the market's slow, nobody's walking on a contract where they're sold. But what if the market turns the other way, which in a year or two, it will. So, plus, if we have weather concerns about North America, there always is a weather concern about the Russian-Ukrainian situation, because statistically, at least 2 out of 5 years have been a disaster.
Right.
So that's what I can comment.
Okay. Thanks for those comments. And just, Ron, I'd like to give you an opportunity as well. Just maybe some comments about where the current stocks are standing for U.S. green lentils, what you see going on with the planting and demand for green lentils from your perspective.
Thanks, Craig. You put the numbers up for acreage and production, and we can all debate the numbers a little bit at this point in time, but it's no doubt in the U.S. We're expecting to be down 25, maybe 30% on seeded acreage. That said, if we can return to more normal yields, we could actually see better production than we had last year. Our farmers are currently in the fields getting the seed in. They're still debating with themselves on what to actually seed. Fortunately for our producers, they have options in what they can put in the ground, and we've had producers as late as last Friday coming in and changing their ideas on as much as 4,000 acres for one of our farmers, going from one product to the other. We are later than last year getting the seed in the ground, and as the seed season has moved further into the year, many of our farmers have gravitated more towards spring wheat, hard red spring wheat. In our areas in Montana and North Dakota, we grow very high quality spring wheat. The demand's a very good price, and our farmers are very good at growing it. They're much more familiar with growing spring wheat than there are pulses. And in times like this, we've seen some of them gravitate back to it because it's something that they know. All that said, it still depends on Mother Nature and what she decides to give us for moisture as we move forward. Last year at this time, we actually looked pretty good. It started getting very, very dry in Montana, and we all know what happened, and we saw the pictures up there again today. It's still dry in eastern Montana, one of our largest growing areas. They have received some moisture, but they will need to get a fair amount more to get us back to normal. So there's still a lot of questions to be answered, and we'll just have to wait and see what we actually get for a crop to try to market around the world.
Okay, thank you, Ron. So I think what we should do now is if we could put up the questions from the audience, because really we're here to respond to your questions, and so we'll get rolling here in a moment as they come up on the screen. But as everybody knows, there's really been a perfect storm with the high prices, good production around the world, and India coming out of being a big driver. So anyway, let's start at the top there. Do you think Canada will compete with Russia and Kazakhstan? Canadian farmers happy about today's picture? And what do they think about the future of Canadian lentils? So Brad, why don't you take a run at some of that, please?
Will Canada compete with Kazakhstan? Probably never. I think Greg mentioned that some of these farms are 300,000, 350,000 acres. So, I mean, their cost of production, the way they can allocate labor and equipment is completely different than other parts of the world. But at the same token, Kazakhstan can't supply the world with lentils, with green lentils, so there are buyers that are always going to have to come to Canada. So I don't think Canada is necessarily saying we have to get our prices down $300 a ton from where they are today, or we're going to be out of business. As it stands today, Kazakhstan can't sell the world. What was the second
It's
part?
right down here in front of us here.
Yeah, but the question's gone.
Yeah, so do you think the questions disappeared, looks like.
Yeah.
So while
So-
we're competing with Ukraine, Kazakhstan farmers and the Russian
Yeah.
farmers.
And, I think the other part of the question was, are Canadian farmers happy with the price of green lentils? Well, if you ask a farmer, they're never happy with any price at any time. But in terms of the value of green lentils today relative to basically the gross dollars they can earn from planting green lentils today versus the other crop choices that they have, they are still okay. I mean, they're not like they were the last couple of years, but they are most definitely above the cost of production. So there's a return, there's a net return to them, which is not necessarily the case with some of the other pulse crops.
Okay, looks like we have a question here regarding grades. So we'd like to know about the grading of green lentils by Canada. Do you think that all the grades fit the actual lot? Any plan to fix this issue of buyers? So Michael, why don't you take a run at that? You import from Europe. So what do you think about the standards of Canadian green lentils matching what you're purchasing?
It's a question to me?
Yeah, go ahead, Michael. Yeah, because you are an
and at
importer
least-
and buyer.
Well, the good thing is Canada and the US does have established standards, although these are, we all know it's decades ago that they were established, and then they were slightly amended and modified. But I think it's probably one of the better working grading systems. Also, I think every buyer has had, problems with getting actual lentils and getting a grade certificate to it. A lot of it is related to submitted sample certificates. A lot of it is related to individual company self-made certification. And a lot of it is related to where is the sample exactly drawn and who is analyzing the sample. I bet if you give a sample to 3 or 4 different officers at the CGC or at SGS, and they'll come up with 3 different results, especially when quality is borderline.
Right.
So at Schlüter and Mark, we work with partners that we know and that we have confidence in, and we don't have confidence in paper. So we like to know who we're dealing with and the ability of people to handle stuff. And that's not only related to Canada, that's worldwide. And I think that's very important in the trade, to know who are you dealing with, and then you don't need to go so much to GAFTA arbitration or so,
Right.
And you don't have so many quality issues, or you get them sorted out. That's what I would commend on grading certificates.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah. Just look at from my perspective, we're processors and exporters of lentils, and what I find is important, number one, is knowing what the buyer really wants to buy. So it's important that if you want packaging quality and you want to have very low foreign material levels that are better than what is allowed in a specific standard, that's important that is clearly communicated up front. So we've been actually doing more what we call like a spec sale. So we would take the number one and then we'd add more information to make sure it covers exactly what the buyer's needs are. So if it's lower foreign material levels, or if you want it color sorted, or if you have a maximum level of splits that you can tolerate, then those things need to be communicated early in order to prevent misunderstandings with cargo arriving. So basically, I think that what I find quite often traveling around is educating the buyers to know what can be allowed in a standard, and to make sure that if you're buying just by price, look out. I think this is the mistake that many say, okay, give me the cheapest price. Well, then expect the lower end of the grade if you're just a price buyer. Okay, so I'm going to move on here to how much is the cost of 1 ton of whole red lentils cost in US dollars for farmers today? Russian farmers said it's just $195 per ton. Can you compete with them? Well, there's also Canadian and red lentils that also grow in the United States as well. I would say that it's going to be difficult for Canadians to compete at those low levels. So the cure for low prices is low prices. So Canadian production that we're going to grow this year will remain in the bin as farmers are expecting better prices. So there's no doubt that our cost of production has gone up. Land values have gone up. Just land alone to rent land is between $100 and $135 Canadian per acre. Labor costs are up, machinery costs are up, oil is up to over $70 a barrel today, so fuel costs are going to go up, which means our fertilizer costs are going to go up. I do believe that that it's going to be very difficult for us to compete with those kind of values. Anybody else want to comment on our competitiveness with Russia and Kazakhstan?
Well, it's the same comment as the green lentils, basically, but I mean, they're producing 100,000 tons or 150,000 tons when the world needs 2 million tons. So yes, they've entered the production of red lentils. Yes, so far their FOB price or their farm price is $180 or $190 a ton, but if the price of wheat goes to $7 a bushel, they'll stop growing red lentils. So it's just a matter of supply and demand. Yep. And if you're someone that can use their quality and you have access to that production, then I suppose those are the lentils you should use. But there are many countries in the world that can't use that quality or that they're farther away from that production where Canadian or US lentils will work just as well.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah, I would agree to that. I think the Russian strategy is more like a hit and run, and now it's hit. And if the market stays low for too long time, it may be run as well. And plus, the weather is a big impact. The currency is a big impact. We shouldn't forget about that. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else to add, Ron?
There may be more for the short term, but long term would be the U.S. and Canada will be there.
Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned that the pet food market. Would you give us a rough estimate of between the U.S. and Canada, what went into that market? That is a very, very good question. I haven't been tracking that number. It's in the total consumption has been going through the roof. Do you want to throw some numbers at that one, Ron?
It's for me, it's almost impossible to throw numbers at it. I mean, we talk to different pet food manufacturers on a weekly basis, but to see what they're actually buying and putting into it, it's really, really difficult to say. I don't have a good answer for that. I'm sorry.
I think one of the keys we can look at is from the 2016 crop, there was a fairly sizable carryover of very low quality red lentils, and they all disappeared. I mean, we actually had Indian buyers a few months back, 5, 6, 7 months ago, asking for low-grade red lentils at a cheap price, and we couldn't find them. So somehow, some way, those lentils disappeared, and who knows how many tons went across the border for pet food, but we've all participated in sales of Canadian lentils for the pet food industry, so even if we all just do a few cars, it's going to add up to a lot of tons.
Yeah.
And fortunately for us, in some respects, the quality that we had in our growing area really didn't lend itself to going into the pet food industry.
Yeah. So it's really important that I think that if we have an established alternative market like that, so if you have a lower quality crop, pet food demand will be there to underpin the value. I think it's also important to know that we're also splitting lentils now, and it's going into value-add markets. So demand around the world is going up for split lentils, whether it be red or basically a green lentil split is a yellow split. So we're seeing good uptake of lower quality green lentils as in this, and being a green lentil panel, we're seeing a lot of lentils going there. But I would throw out a number of 200,000 to 300,000 tons. So next question is, there's a buyer here who, when is the best time to buy green lentils in terms of availability and price? And would that be July, August, or September? Okay, well,
I told you to bring your crystal ball.
okay. Well, in terms of time, I just want to just take a run at that. Look, as far as I'm concerned, we're at or near the bottom. Around our office, I've been saying that May is a pivot month, and that we're going to see a turnaround in May. I think that's coming true, and it's being driven by weather. I often talk about the wall of worry, which drives the values of green lentils up. And at the moment, I would say that we have a couple steps up the wall of worry. Timing of the seeding, the lack of subsoil moisture, these are starting to create questions in terms of our ability to keep and sustain these lower values. So best time, right now you have known quality and you have some of the cheapest priced lentils. So if you like the quality we have right now, which is a very good 2 or better, and some number ones that mixed in there, this is a good time to buy. And if you want new crop, well, of course, you can probably start talking to exporters from Canada or United States to buy fresh green lentils, of course. Some markets are really like that really bright, fresh green. So Mexico, Morocco, Spain, Greece, they're really like green color. So all through Europe, that's very important. All through the West Coast, South America, color is very important. So, we don't have the best of color this last year because it was very hot and dry at harvest time. So I'd like to get some other comments in terms of timing and pricing, and maybe start down there with you, Ron. Then.
Well, and so much of it depends on the year. I mean, last year, earlier in the season, when we thought we were going to have a big crop, I know ourselves, we were more aggressive in selling new crop, and we really slowed up as we were watching the weather and saw it, starting to drought out. This year, we're a little bit snake bit from last year, and we're maybe asking a little bit more of a premium just because we're not sure exactly what's going to happen. But as we get through the year, if the moisture does come in, we see we're going to have a crop, then we'll be more aggressive. So a lot of it just depends on the year.
Yeah, I guess the attempt to catch the very low end of the market usually fails. So I think one should value a crop against where has it been historically, what are production costs, what other bad things can happen to the demand side of the market. And I believe we're close to seeing the low end. We could go lower. There's a lot of influencing factors, and currency is one that we haven't touched yet. As a German company, I look more at the euro. I think the euro is up against the dollar, still over 10% from last year. The Russian ruble is down 20%. So we see that as a lot of impact, and it could change. It could change with crude oil prices. I think if something's reasonably priced and there's an existing business behind it, cover it in. I mean, we're not at $1,500 lentils right now.
Exactly. Yeah, so the next question is about India has high duties and demand is low. So how many tons of red lentils and green lentils are going to be carried out for the new season? So, well, we know that there's a good carry out globally. I'll take a run at Canada. There's red lentils, 500,000 tons of red, so we have good supply there. In terms of large green lentils, 70,000 tons, 60,000 tons. Richley's size, non-existent to speak of. A few hundred tons, maybe 1,000 tons laying around in Canadian bins is very, very low supply. And in terms of Eston's, 20,000 ton, really good 2, low number 1 color. So that's what we have in the Canadian side. Just go down the line here. Why don't you guys give some figures for the U.S. and what you see maybe in Kazakhstan and potential carryovers. You want to start, Ron?
Sure. As far as red lentil carryover for us is almost zero. We have virtually none. As far as the green lentils, you say maybe 150,000 tons, something like that in our area.
Yeah. Any thoughts, Michael, on?
Again, the crystal ball. I can only guess this. There's going to be a couple of 10,000 tons of green lentils likely left in Kazakhstan and Russia, of all types of quality. But yeah, production this year was certainly higher than what you could market. It could be a totally different story this year. I mean, if we're talking about, I'm just throwing in a number, maybe 30 to 50,000 tons of available stocks. which it could be, but doesn't necessarily have to be. Does it really anything do to the big supply-demand side? No. So, but yeah, there's going to be a carryover.
Okay. Brad, your thoughts on carryovers around the world?
Yeah, I mean, you know, looking at Canada, I think the demand has been brisk enough all year long, and the values to the growers have been good relative to other pulse crops that I think they have marketed a lot of their green lentils. So I don't think the carryover of green lentils is going to be as a percentage of production or in terms of other years. I don't think it's going to be a lot different. And I think that's why we're seeing a trend to the same acreage or maybe even more acreage this year coming, is that the growers are not necessarily worried about having bins full of green lentils sitting on their farm and wondering what they're going to do with them. I think a lot of them have already marketed them.
Yeah.
And one thing too with our farmers, they have the ability to hold their product. They don't have to market it every year. They can take it from year to year. So if they don't like the price, they'll hold on to it. So maybe we see in our areas the farmers more willing to hold on to their product.
Okay. Thanks, gentlemen. Next question has to do with, okay, we just had a change in priority here, okay? So what will happen to Canadian lentils in the EU if the glyphosate law will be reviewed, and why not taking steps now to prevent it? So I think this is a good question for you, Michael. Maybe give us your perspective on MRLs and glyphosate.
Yeah, okay, it's a good question actually, and it's an important question because GPC is working very much towards being active in the MRL part of things and getting MRLs harmonized and also based on scientific knowledge. So there's probably a bit of a misunderstanding. The glyphosate usage in the EU has been extended for 5 years. It's a highly political issue. Was supposed to be extended for 10 years, and because there's a lot of opposition against it, it was only extended by 5 years, I believe until 2022. That concerns the use of glyphosate as a crop protection agent in the EU. It does not concern necessarily the MRLs. The MRLs are going to be reviewed, and they may be lowered, yes, but the MRL for lentils is 10. The typical content of glyphosate we see coming in from Canada and the US is around 2. And we have a Codex MRL, I believe, at 5. And my thinking is it would be very difficult for the EU to remove the MRL for lentils completely. So there are, there's Diaquat, for example. There are other agents that can do the same in desiccation that you don't necessarily need glyphosate. It may be something in the EU, you never know, probably coming more from the retailer side, requesting lower MRLs. But I don't see it as an issue coming up right now from the very legal side of the EU.
Okay.
But anyways, it's something to watch, and we have a committee in GPC,
right.
And everybody that has, it's not green lentils now, it's the MRL committee, everybody that has to contribute something to that is highly welcome.
Okay, Brad, do you have any comments about the use of glyphosate on lentils from your perspective?
I agree with Michael. I mean, there were products before glyphosate came along, and then it became popular. And the minute that the herbicide companies start to hear about the potential for glyphosate not being used as a desiccant, they'll come up with something else. And it'll probably have an application rate of 10% of what we're using today or something like that, because they're all, everyone in that side of the business is driven towards less pesticide residue. So I think if we have 5 years, I think the problem will start to fix itself.
Okay. Ron?
I mean, the market will drive the direction, and if the consumers are saying that it's something that they don't want, they can't have, then the producers will react and the chemical companies will react as well.
Okay. Next question is, what is the premium received of green over red? Well, right now, roughly on a SIF value basis, greens are running in the, say a 2 at $620 to $675 a ton, and currently right now reds are trading down, in the low 400 range. So there's a couple $100 to $250 a ton difference right now. Again, red lentil prices, from my perspective, are at a price that is not going to encourage production long term, especially if the farmers have low price and a low yield. It'll be very challenging for the trade to purchase red lentils from growers in Canada, And I'd like to get your views down the line here, Brad. Any thoughts on just disparity or price premium of green over red?
Yeah, I mean, the market is the market. There's too many reds, there's not too many greens. That's bad grammar, but
Yeah.
anyway. So the spread is wide. I mean, we're paying the grower 17 or 18 cents a pound to grow red lentils or for his red lentils in storage, and we would still pay 24 cents or 25 cents maybe for green lentils. That's maybe a wider spread than normal, but, you know, the market is the market, and maybe there'll be more green lentils and less red lentils, and that premium, that spread will come closer together. The spread is there because it's easier to grow red lentils than it is green lentils. They yield more consistently. The quality is more consistent. They're traded on a number 2 or better. They don't have to always be a number 1. So the spread will always be there.
Right.
It's just that premium itself just moves a little bit from time to time.
Okay. All right, maybe we'll just jump to the next question then about Canadian quality. It's basically the question is why Canadian quality every year, results every year are different. I mean, layered number 2 quality, will you send, okay, I'm having a hard reading this one here. You send under the name of number 1 another season. So do you have a fix for this table? Look at, from my perspective as an exporter, we're consistent with our quality. Changes from year to year. In a Canadian standard, we have a chart that shows the minimum color range for a number 1 green. So we definitely, because of the hot dry last year, we had lower color. The green was at the lower end of the range. So a 1 is a 1 in terms of color. It does have some room to move. If you want a specific color, then we can actually send that pictures or send a sample. If you want a type sample, we can sell by that. In terms of damages, those things are consistent splits for number 1. There's a maximum tolerance, and so for packaging quality, you know, people want 1 to 1.25%. Some want even less than that. Number 2's a couple 3% maximum. So I think it's pretty consistent from our perspective. And I'd like to get some other comments. Do you have anything else to say, fellas, about quality? And
I mean, just as you say, Greg, the color will vary from year to year, and at harvest, the damage and the peel split and broken will vary from year to year, but those are all grading factors. So if we have a year of higher values, higher damage, higher peel split and broken, then more of the crop will fall into a lower grade. That's how the system works.
yeah.
I guess we shouldn't forget it's a natural product. I get the question being an importer in Europe, but we're also originators in Canada, so we see both sides of the coin. And I think it's one of the interesting things in this business that you're dealing with a product that's grown on a field naturally. It's not coming off a 3D printer, so it has to be different every year. And I think it has always been the understanding of the Canadian Grain Commission as well, that every year is different. There's reference samples, and you cannot manufacture quality to a certain extent. I mean, you can do a cleaning job very well, but you can't paint lentils.
No.
I guess that would be an MRL issue at the end.
Yes.
So you have to essentially take what's there, and you have to also appreciate there's a lot of regions in the world where the farmers are doing a perfect job.
Yeah.
If you look at Canada, the University of Saskatchewan has put so much effort into developing the right crop varieties, and it's in the years with surplus, that's the questions coming up. In the years with deficits, the questions coming up, how do we nourish the world? Mm-hmm. I think that's the bigger challenge.
Ron, any comments about quality? I guess it's more of a Canadian question they're asking, but I think basically in the U.S., as far as your quality and green lentils down there, I understand you do have an FAQ quality meeting, and there's some degree of flexibility, but there's got to be a line that you draw for color for your U.S. green lentils?
There is an FAQ, okay, but it still goes off of the grade standard, if you will. We'll try to market that or sell that because some of our customers that like to have that color quality, if you will, but we always get in the argument with our producers, well, it's grade 1.
Right.
So it gets really difficult.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Okay, so roughly how many tons of USA green lentils were reported to or exported to China in 2017?
Just a few thousand tons, to the best of my knowledge.
Yeah, so it's pretty small.
Very, very, very small.
And from the Canadian perspective, it's very small. There's a few tons of small caliber Chinese estins that come into Europe for canning purposes.
We are getting more and more interest, but it's not translated into trades.
Be wonderful if we could take this Pulse initiative to over 1 billion people in China and have them enjoy lentils. It would be a transformative new demand. So financially, how long can those large stocks be held? Well, low interest rates make it pretty cheap to hold. I think that's what farmers are betting on right now. We're at 3.5% at the bank, and I think farmers are banking on a 10% increase in prices, so it's pretty good return on investment. From their perspective, red lentils stay in the bin for years. As far as I've bought lentils as old as 2016, 2015. It's amazing how long some of these lentils can stay in the bin. Green lentils surely turn brown, but they can be used for other purposes. Thoughts down the line? Ron, do you want to start? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's so farmer specific. It's so specific to each individual producer, what other crops they're growing, how their production is in those crops, how the markets are for those crops. Like I said, for our farmers, they have the ability to hold some product so they can make those decisions.
Yeah.
You're a farmer too, and you know farmers are cash rich in Canada. So,
yeah.
So I think you can hold on to them for a long time. And just to combine it with the other question, what does the quality do? If you hold on them as a farmer for enough time and you sell them in a rising market or in a tight market, nobody's looking at your color anymore.
Yeah.
So a little bit of brownish color doesn't matter. It's the supply that has to be there. So it gets an asset to farmers, and we see that on a lot of the special crops.
Yeah. I think it's important to realize that, I remember in 2013 we had a huge crop of green lentils, and subsequently in 2014 we had a lot of rain, and suddenly, the 2013 lentils that were old crop were better quality than what was being produced, and suddenly they went up in value very rapidly. So that's what I think what farmers are betting on. So we're down to our last minute. So are farmers aware of what's going on in terms of supply, demand, political issues, and pricing? So start with you, Brad. How do you see farmers and their awareness now?
Well, the world is very small. I mean, the farmers have access to all the same information that we do, plus a lot of them either hire or follow or subscribe to, these brokers or market newsletter writers that we have in Canada. So I would say, minute to minute, they know what's happening in the world. I mean, you will hear announcement of a duty increase or a new duty in India, and within 5 minutes on Twitter, the farmer-to-farmer discussion has already begun. What's this going to do to price? Did you see this? Did you see that? So I think they're very aware of everything that's happening in the world almost as quickly as we are in the industry.
Michael?
I would totally agree. Even for Russia and Kazakhstan, it's information is running quicker than anything else. It's at the speed of light. Mm-hmm. And yes, guys are well informed. There's nobody really dumb.
Yeah. Ron?
Yeah, I mean, it's in this day and age with technology, our producers are very much aware of what's going on, I think sometimes quicker than we are. But we also, view our producer partners as partners, and we share with them what we're seeing. So not only they viewing it and analyzing it for themselves, we also try to share with them what we're seeing and what we think will happen, not just a month out, but a year out. So we're trying to make sure that they see those things as well.
Okay. Well, thanks, gentlemen. Looks like we are out of time, and so I'll turn this back over to the GPC. And thanks, everybody, for your attention and questions, and hopefully we answered them. And have a great, enjoy the rest of the day and the convention.
Thank you. Once again, an excellent panel. I'd like to request the panel to please give us a memento photograph right here in front. Gentlemen, a photograph of the panel right in front here, together. Apologies. The Global Green Lentils Outlook, just concluding, a couple of announcements before we wind up for the day. Our photographer is here. Very quickly, take this photograph for this panel. Thank you, Mr. Simpson, Mr. Ford, Mr. Kemperdick, and Williams. This session has been sponsored by Seaboard, as you can see on the stage or have seen through the presentations. This is the concluding presentation of the day. Just to remind you that tomorrow the registrations, for those of you missed out, start at 9:30 in the morning. And the first session will start thereafter. You have the schedule with you, but you don't want to miss the first session because it's going to be all about GBC Young Professionals update. After that, we will focus on beans, lentils, peas, and chickpeas, and of course, we wind up tomorrow with the gala closing reception. So look forward to a packed day tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen. For now, it's time to say goodbye. We'll see you tomorrow morning. Thank you.